Hello, everybody. Dave Rauch here, CEO of ProTech. Welcome to the Maintenance Manager. I'm extremely happy to have as our guest today Tom Skiba, who is the CEO of the Community Associations Institute, which is now 50,000 members strong.
Yeah, amazing, huh?
Yep. And this is the 51st year of the annual conference in Orlando. And last year was the 50th anniversary, which was a big shindig.
Yep.
So anyhow, Tom, before we get into the business, the things that are going on, of which there's a lot of things going on in our industry, as you know.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, we got through the whole thing with the Corporate Transparency Act, fortunately.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Oh, you don't think that's done?
I don't think we're at the end. We're at a good place now, but I don't think we're at the end.
Anyhow, the big news is that, Tom, you're retiring next month, and you've been with the association, with the industry, running the industry for almost 25 years now?
Yeah, 23 years in April.
All right, fantastic. You want to tell us a little bit about Tom Skiba before we get into some of the issues?
Sure, absolutely. So 23 years ago, I was working as a consultant for a very large international consultancy, KPMG, and running the not-for-profit consulting group in Washington. I had a young son. My son was 6 at the time, and I really wanted to spend more time at home. And this opportunity came along. Needless to say, spending more time at home did not work out the way I anticipated it. I still travel quite a bit. I don't travel like I did when I was a consultant, where I would, get on a plane on a Monday morning, fly to, say, Atlanta, come back Friday night, and do that for 6 months solid. I go different places every week, but I still spend a lot of time on the road. My son's now 30.
Wow.
So time has flown by, but it's been a great experience and one I've enjoyed immensely.
And you were consulting for not-for-profits, not just associations, but other not-for-profits.
Not just membership organizations like CAI, although many of them, but I did work for the Smithsonian, I did work for the Kennedy Center, American Cancer Society, a variety of organizations all over the U.S.
Wow. And what interested you in CAI 23, 24 years ago? What drew you into this business?
I think a couple of things. First was, it was a position that I think played to my skill set. CAI was in a challenging position 23 years ago, both financially and operationally, and it was time to reinvent the organization. And I think that's actually one of the reasons the board selected me, was they wanted someone with my consulting background to come in and really do a deep dive and analysis into what needed to change at CAI. And we created a program that back at that time that we called the Member Value Initiative. It had a couple of parts. We completely redesigned the membership structure. We implemented all new technology on the back end to operate, because the technology we were using was abysmally primitive. We rebranded the entire organization, so the magazine logos changed, kind of everything we touched, the way it looked changed, and then we also changed the governance model. When I started, the board had 25 members. It had 18 standing committees, I think, and a 5-member executive committee that unsurprisingly did almost all the decision making, and the board kind of rubber stamped it. So we shrunk the board. We eliminated most of the standing committees. We right now only really have 3 standing committees, and made it a lot more efficient. And one of the challenges in governance is you get great people to volunteer their time. You have to be respectful of that time, and it's easy in an association environment to lose track of that. I don't want to have 8-hour board meetings. I want to have 90-minute board meetings where the board's actually talking about important stuff and making important decisions.
Amen.
They should not be picking out what the entree is at the annual dinner. right?
Sure.
That's just not a good use of their time. And
Yeah.
so all of those things came together, and I guess it was about the end of 2004. We had to make all these changes, and then we had a long conversation, and we decided, you know what? Change is painful for everyone. Let's rip the Band-Aid off and do it all at once. So we changed the membership structure, we changed the governance structure, the rebranding went into effect. I mean, all of that happened basically in less than a 6-month period.
Wow.
In terms of implementation. And it was a little bit painful, and people were,
Yep.
you know, especially people who had been members for a long, long time and had an ownership of the way the organization was. But when I started, there were about 15,000 members at CAI.
Wow.
When we did the membership transition, that adjusted up to about 20,000. We're now at 50,000 plus members.
A lot more.
A lot more. Not only a lot more, but a lot broader coverage, right? We have members in 22 countries, which we never had before.
22 countries.
22 countries. Not huge numbers of them necessarily,
Yeah.
but we have a presence.
They grow.
And they grow. We have 3 international chapters, which we didn't have before, Canada, South Africa, and Dubai. And they're doing quite well. We've increased our footprint in the U.S. pretty dramatically. We've added chapters here. We've added capacity around the country. I now have 3 regional chapter support people that never existed before. That based in Chicago, one based here in Florida, and one based in Texas. And they work with local chapters to provide them with some additional support and additional resources.
Wow.
And that helps build and strengthen the chapter network.
That's an amazing structure you've created.
Yeah.
Back then, were you the one involved in creating the kind of the tripartite system where you've got the homeowner representatives, the business partners, and the management? And they
so
kind of
that-
like the three-legged stool of the organization.
Yeah, actually, that was part of the governance changes that we made.
It was.
So we've always had those 3 groups of members, right? That's been fundamental to CAI since its inception in 1973. We've always had homeowner members. We've always had the cadre of managers and management companies. Then we've always had the business partners like yourself. But they always didn't have mandatory roles and mandatory representation when it came to the board. So now we have what we call a member representation group, or MRG, for each of those 3 groups: homeowners, managers, business partners, and they feed board members into the board of trustees. The majority of the board, I guess 11 out of 15, come via those groups.
Gotcha.
The other 4 are at large, and they're selected by a nominating committee. And those groups, those MRG groups, are actually elected by their constituent members. So every homeowner member every year gets to vote for some of the homeowner MRGs. Every manager gets to vote for the manager MRG. So they're representative of their constituencies. They then feed their particular group's issues where they differ up to the board of trustees. Exactly. So that each of our core member groups, can feel represented at the decision-making level of the organization.
Right. Another question on the structure. A lot of people aren't aware that the foundation sits over here as a separate entity and CAI is over here. So maybe could you just talk about that just a little bit?
Sure.
The Foundation for Community Association Research, the think tank under it, and how it interacts with CAI.
Sure. Actually,
is there any other entities like FCAR?
Actually, we have 3 entities that are part of, I guess, what I would call the greater CAI family.
3.
That I'm the chief executive of. CAI, the membership organization, is obviously the central pillar, and it's the largest, right? It's the largest budget, it's the largest number of staff. Then we have the foundation. The foundation's focus is doing research. The foundation is set up as a 501c3, so it can accept donations, and those donations can be tax deductible. And so we have individuals, business partners like yourself, individual homeowners who make donations to the foundation. But the foundation's focus is on research. It's on understanding our industry, understanding what's coming next, and trying to help prepare the universe of organizations and individuals who are involved in community associations for what's next. So we do some very basic things. We do salary survey for managers, for example. But we're also looking at, okay, how does tech and AI impact on how an association is run in the next 30 years?
Right.
Kind of real forward-looking issues. And we have a third organization, and that is what we refer to as CAM-ICB, Community Association Managers International Certification Board.
Wow,
I know,
that's
it's
a big
mouthful.
It's international.
Yeah, CAM-ICB is responsible for creating and administering the CMCA examination. And it's an independent entity principally because we have pursued external certification of that testing environment and that credential. So it is now an ISO approved international credential for community association managers.
Oh wow, ISO.
So it's ISO and
legit.
NCCA here in the U.S. And in ISO's requirements, the organization that provides the training, CAI, can't also be the organization that assesses the individuals for their credential. So we have a separate organization that does it. They develop the CMCA exam. They, at any given time, have 4 or 5 versions of the exam that are circulating around. They contract for all the testing centers. So now you don't have to go to a classroom somewhere and sit down and take the test. You can go to a testing center and you sit down at a computer, you take the test, you get your grade before you walk out the door.
Wow.
And so it's become more efficient. The beauty of that is those testing centers are international. So they've got truly global presence to allow our exam to be administered and people to achieve the credential wherever they might live.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's stay on the international track right here.
Sure.
I guess it must have been, 10 years ago that you started, or maybe it was 15 years ago that you started to go to Dubai first? Was that the first international destination? And kind of what was your vision then? And what is your vision now? I know you're retiring, but is the vision to spread from the Middle East onto Europe and Australia? I know Australia has its own strata system.
Yep. So the general strategy is we go where there's interest and there's individuals willing to put the time in to make it happen. We went to Dubai initially because Jeevan DeMello, who was the head of EMAR's community management operation, asked us to come and teach classes. We then got involved with the government. We had a partnership with the government delivering classes to all the managers in Dubai. And now you can't work as a manager in Dubai unless you have the M100 under your belt.
Wow, that's great.
We have a similar situation in Bahrain. I'm working on a similar requirements in Saudi Arabia and Qatar. We can't go somewhere if we don't have a champion on the ground. That's the important lesson. Is that I'm not going to go to a country where we don't have someone who's already in the industry and on the ground who really wants to make it happen. Because I can't do it remote control from thousands of miles away. There's a huge opportunity for us as an organization, and it's not always creating a chapter. Sometimes that's the right solution, but in the case, you mentioned Australia, and Australia has an organization that's been around not quite as long as CAI, but about 30 years, called Strata Community Association. And they have chapters in Australia and New Zealand, and they do things that are very similar to us. So what we've chosen to do is we're not going to compete with them, we're going to partner with them. So they've actually adopted the M100 program, and they've created an Australian version of the M100. They call the A100, unsurprisingly. And they have been administering that now for 5 or 6 years across Australia and New Zealand. And they pay us a small royalty for every student that takes the exam, the class, because the original content is from CAI. That's in that location, in that circumstance, that kind of partnership is the best way to proceed. So, different circumstances, different solutions based on what
Mm-hmm.
presence we have on the ground with membership, whether or not there's an existing organization. So I've had the opportunity to go to conferences in other countries.
Mm-hmm.
The EU is an interesting challenge because you not only have the laws in each of the member countries,
Right.
but you also have the EU law and regulation overlaid on top of it. So it can be very complex. So we've done some things in Spain. We've done some things in the UK. But the next step for us is really working on a relationship with the EU level entities in the real estate space to say, hey, we have some things we think are of value. You guys have some things that are of value. How can we partner? And if we can partner at the EU level, then each of the constituent countries can take advantage of that.
Yep. And I'm only assuming that that the Middle East has been really a prime place for CAI to get established because, like mushrooms after the rain, new communities are, I think, sprouting up all over
Everywhere.
the Middle East, and not so much in Europe, but probably in South America, probably in Asia. So I'm thinking that you are already thinking about other areas.
Oh, absolutely.
And how do you find a champion? I mean, I know Jivan just kind of, we were lucky to get him, but how do you find more Jivans?
We do outreach to help identify those people. We essentially volunteer to participate in activities or conferences that are taking place. So, for example, there's a regular conference that takes place in South America called SIGSA, and they bring managers together from all over South America. So the last 4 conferences there, we've had someone go down and speak.
Gotcha.
Not me, because I don't speak Spanish very well. But we find somebody to fill that role. And so that does 2 things. One is it puts CAI in and the things we do in front of an international audience, but it also gives our people who are on site then a chance to make connections with the next Jivan.
Gotcha.
And so we try to use that as a way to build those connections, to build those relationships, and then identify an opportunity where it presents itself.
Gotcha. Well, expanding from 15,000 members to 50,000.
50,000.
Expanding from just in the U.S. to 22 member countries.
Yep, 22 countries.
That's an amazing accomplishment.
It's been a pretty exciting ride, I got to say.
Let's shift a little bit and talk about some of the most recent issues. The big one, which has affected all of us, is Champlain Towers South collapse.
Absolutely.
Here in Florida. And so CAI sprang into action very quickly and came up with the Condo Safety Public Policy Report, and 3 task forces that you created came up with that for laws that state legislatures could pass to try to avoid another collapse like that. Tell me how that was. Was that like a crazy time for the industry, for you? And tell me a little bit about the task force creation and that.
So obviously this is a transformational moment for our industry.
Right.
This is a wake-up call. To have a building that, with no otherwise external environment. It wasn't a hurricane. It wasn't an earthquake. It wasn't a fire that triggered this. Literally no trigger event to collapse in the middle of the night and kill 97 people and destroy 120 odd homes. It was a wake-up call for us as an industry. In fact, Dawn Bauman and I spent most of the week after the collapse in Surfside, and it just so happened we were staying at a Marriott Residence Inn where the Red Cross had put many of the survivors.
Wow, I didn't know.
So we were sitting having breakfast every morning with folks who literally had their home wiped off the face of the earth. And, and it was incredibly emotionally moving. What these people went through. And honestly, the survivor guilt that many of them had. That my neighbor right across the hall is gone, he's dead, and somehow I survived this. but it was clearly something that we needed to take action on, and I have to give credit where credit is due. Dawn was the champion for this, and the leader of this process, and hundreds of members of CAI, probably 400 or 500 members, actively participated in this process, in these 3 task forces, in the document development, in the review, and really talking about a couple of issues. One, what has to change in terms of reserve studies and standards? What has to change in terms of risk management and insurance requirements? And then what do we have to do to educate all the parties? So not just the legislatures, right, who need education.
Sure.
Because they don't necessarily understand they don't understand the nuances of but the boards and the owners. All right. I mean, at the time, Florida's law was very specific. The board could propose a capital investment, a reserve investment, to make repairs, and the owners could vote by a simple majority not to do it.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's what happened at at Champlain Towers South. Several years in a row, they voted against the work that needed to be done in that building.
I think when it was first proposed, it was a $3 million repair.
Yeah.
And then it was 9.
Right.
Then it was 13. And then when they were actually finally approved the work to be done, which was being done when it collapsed.
Which had just begun.
But it was kind of delayed because of the COVID.
Yeah.
But that's a huge escalation.
Absolutely. I mean, it's no different. I mean, I hate to simplify it, but it's kind of no different than maintaining your car. If you changing the oil costs $30 or $40. If you don't change the oil, an engine rebuild is a lot more expensive, right? So the longer you wait, the longer you defer maintenance, the longer you let problems continue, regardless of what the source of them is, the solution is always going to be more expensive.
Fix fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Fix fast.
And so, so we had, I mean, like I said, 400 or 500 members who participated in this process and continue to do so, because now that we've got a standard, we've got a model, if you will, now we're trying to get state legislatures around the country. So now our legislative action committees and our advocates around the country are walking this through the halls of their state capitals, saying, hey, this could happen here. And we need to give people the tools they need to be successful in dealing with it, so we don't have a tragedy here in our state. And we've had a couple of states follow up. New Jersey passed a bill last year, and we continue to push it. We have all 50 states in session in 2025, and we're pushing it wherever there's someone even appears to be willing to listen.
Yeah,
we're certainly pushing it. But this is a transformational thing that happened in our industry. And one which we very early came to the conclusion, if we weren't part of the solution, then we were default part of the problem. And I'm really proud of what we've accomplished. I'm really proud of all the volunteers who have spent countless hours, thousands of hours on this project to try to build an architecture that enhances safety in buildings.
Yep. And speaking of Dawn Bauman, after this, that was an arduous process. She was the one that spearheaded this, which is the best practice for maintenance.
That's right.
And she did a great job on that. But you can tell she is so passionate about this subject, and committed to getting some things changed and fixed.
Yeah, I will tell you. Dawn and I spent 5 or 6 days in Surfside immediately after the collapse. And I think we were both incredibly moved by what we saw. Not only what the victims had gone through, but the actions by all of the local people, the state, the federal emergency management folks, the Red Cross, who were working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to try to see if there was anybody still alive in that pile. I don't think she had ever experienced anything like that. I spent more than 20 years as a volunteer firefighter, so I did.
Oh, really?
I had experienced some things like that, and it's an incredibly moving experience when you go through
Sure.
it, up close and personal. And I think both of us walked away, with convinced that we had to lead on this issue.
Right.
Right. And I think that's where we've ended up with reserve studies, with the public policy, with the maintenance best practice. And if our members use these tools, they can, you never can eliminate risk. We all know
Sure.
that, but you can certainly manage risk. And,
Sure.
and I think every board should be having this kind of conversation
Right.
with their members, with their owners,
Exactly.
about why we need to spend time and money on these things, why we need to, the things we need to do to keep the building safe. Not just because of the risk of failure, but for very practical reasons. This is, for most people, their home, their largest investment.
Right.
And so if you can explain to them this is about protecting their investment and
Absolutely.
hoping to get it to grow as faster than the building across the street, because
Sure.
our buildings better taken care of. It is in their financial best interests to take care of the building and make sure that it is well cared for, structurally sound, and attractive to potential buyers.
Exactly. Maintain, protect, and enhance.
Yeah,
improve,
exactly.
improve property values.
Exactly right.
Now, we sat down for 2 days with Scott Stewart, who was the manager, and speak about tragedy. He just couldn't stop being emotional because,
Of course.
and I didn't realize it, but he had lost 98 friends,
Of course.
and he was friends with a lot of those
Well,
people.
and Scott,
really,
and I had the same chance to chat with him. He was brought in, he was hired when they finally agreed to do all
He was
this
getting
repair
it
work.
done.
He was the guy they brought in to do it all.
Yep.
And they had just begun the process. Yeah, I think it was terribly emotionally,
yeah.
striking for him.
One of the things that I learned from Scott was that they really weren't doing maintenance. The two maintenance guys he had couldn't even speak English. Scott was having to show them how to lubricate valves and do some of the boiler maintenance.
Yeah.
And so it was a tragedy. And that's one of my passions, is somehow coming up with laws that require the developer to give the community, the new community board of directors, an instruction manual, a simple instruction manual like you get with your car,
Right.
like you get with a toaster.
You need an owner's manual for the building.
That kind of synthesizes all the mechanical equipment instructions so that a board can understand what they have to do.
Right.
And so that's kind of my passion on this, is that it wasn't the board's fault. It wasn't the manager's fault. It wasn't anybody's fault, because they were never given instructions, and so that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Let's also be realistic. The challenge for a board, the challenge for the manager, once the building's been built, and this is a building that was 40 odd years old,
Right, 40.
Is you don't know what's behind the walls, if you will. You don't have that instruction manual that documents every valve that was put in, every pipe, every pipe chase, every wire that was pulled, and you can't see them anymore because they're embedded. But just as importantly, this is a pocketbook issue for every owner, right? So when you come to a group of owners, when you have your annual meeting and say we need $350,000 for maintenance, that's a tough sell.
Oh, yeah.
And so you have to not just educate the board and the manager, you ultimately have to educate every owner and say, this is why we have to make these investments in maintenance, because we need to preserve the building, we need to make sure it stays safe, we need to preserve your investment, and it comes down to literally educating every owner.
Yep.
I'd love to see a change in law, even in states where owners can vote against a spending reserve funds, where if there's a requirement to make a repair that is health and safety related, the board can do that unilaterally. and it doesn't require a vote of all the members.
That would be a good law.
Right? If you can at least give free the board's hands on things that are life safety related, then at least then they can make, I mean, if you've got a chance of an elevator failing, let's fix that, okay? Because somebody could get hurt.
Yep.
I'm less worried about, painting or, or tile that's lifting or something else. But the basic life safety systems within a building are critical.
I hope there's some change made there too, because that is really the main conundrum: is how do you get a board to spend the money to do the necessary maintenance, critical safety related maintenance, when you have to tell the homeowners, hey, we need to spend $3 million here, and by the way, that's a special assessment for each one of you of $30,000.
Yep.
And especially in Florida here, it's particularly difficult because you got a lot of retired folks.
Sure, you have a lot of people on fixed incomes.
And so the board gets recalled.
Yep.
Until it just gets so bad that, we saw what happened. So it's a hard problem.
And then ultimately, even without a disaster like Champlain Towers, when you finally get people to agree to it, as you said before, it costs 10 times more than it would have originally if you'd done it when you needed to do it in the first place.
Yeah, and that's why I'm Johnny Appleseed with the maintenance stuff here.
Exactly.
Start at day one, year one, start maintaining correctly and strong.
Yeah. One of the interesting things I have seen in the last couple of years is developers who are doing a better job of documenting the construction process so that when they turn the building over, it's not only turning over the building, but all the records. Here's the list of valves. Here's the list of electrical panels. All the things that went into the building, and even shooting video of the building periodically throughout construction. So you have a record of what's behind the walls.
Sure.
Right. So that if you need to bring an engineer in, and you need to bring a reserve provider in, you can give them that data and said, okay, here's what the power control room, the electrical control room looked like before before it was finished. And you can see all the pipe chases and the wiring runs and everything else. That's tremendously valuable.
Yep.
And just in the last couple of years, we've started to see that. Not everyone, obviously.
And 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I met with Don Horton's second in command down in Dallas, and other developers explaining the importance of manual at new communities, and they were emphatic that anything that would increase the operating budget was not in the cards. And because, when you put a maintenance manual out there, which is an instruction list, inspection list, basic inspections, not too many, but there does require some work and inspections, because that's when you find the problems and then you fix them. And anything like that harms sales is not something.
Sales and adds to the expense budget. I get that.
Yeah, but in California with SB 800, it was a different thing. So most of the new communities in California do have the maintenance manuals, and some in Oregon and Minnesota too.
And I think that's part of our job, is to educate the legislatures, to sufficiently, so that they can be supportive of some of these changes to the overall legislative architecture in their states. You're not going to turn them into engineers. You're not going to turn them into reserve providers. But I think you can talk to them and say, very simply, you don't want to have to go on television if this kind of disaster happens in your state, and explain why, when there was a bill up 2 years ago, you voted against it.
And Florida here is such a unique state because of so many retirees, so many high-rise communities. As you know, right now there's some problems in Florida because the unintended consequences of the new law requiring structural inspections every 30, at year 30, and then every
5 years.
5 years. Has created, I think, a number of communities have had big special assessments based on those. And then people are having to sell because they don't have the money for the special assessment. And that's causing a problem here in Florida now.
I mean, Is there going to be some pain involved? Yeah, there is going to be some pain involved.
Yeah.
But I would argue that pain is substantially less than your building collapsing from underneath
Absolutely.
you at 1:19 in the morning.
Absolutely. Safety has to be the North Star
Exactly.
through this current condo crisis.
I think there's creative solutions to that. I think you can, work with your banking partner and say, you know what, we're going to borrow the money, secure the loan via assessments, and allow people to spread that cost out over 10 years or 20 years. And so you can find ways to leverage outside funding in a way that maybe makes it doable for most of your residents.
Sure.
Will it be true for everyone? No, probably won't. But again, is that worth sacrificing everyone's safety for?
Right.
No, not in my mind.
Off Florida's case now.
Florida is unique. I will admit that.
Nationally, we're having this insurance crisis. I call it a crisis because I think it's pretty widespread.
Yeah.
Although it's hit California worse than other states because of the fire zones and the insurance increasing a lot. Do you want to talk about the insurance crisis at all, Tom, or do you have any other things that you're dealing with now?
I mean, insurance is obviously a crisis, but it seems like it's been a crisis since I came to CAI in 2002. Really? Somewhere in the U.S., it has been a crisis. I mean, Florida has had 3 or 4 insurance crises in the last 23 years. It is somewhat cyclical, right? The states have been, in some cases, have contributed to the problem, but in some cases have contributed to the solution.
Yeah.
The bigger challenge has to be, how do you broaden the insured base geographically so that when we're underwriting Southern California, we're not underwriting just Southern California, we're underwriting the whole state and maybe Washington and Oregon too, and that's the pool, so that we're spreading the risk in a broader way.
Right.
If we're underwriting Florida for hurricane coverage, we're not just underwriting Florida, we're underwriting the whole Gulf Coast and the whole Atlantic coast all the way up to New England. And so the pool's bigger, which spreads the risk around, and then makes it easier for an insurance company to get secondary insurance, at Lloyd's or in some other secondary insurer, because it's a broader pool.
Sure.
That to me, in the long run, is how is the only real solution. That requires state legislatures to cooperate, because the way in many cases it works, if you get insurance in Florida, it's got to be through the Florida Insurance Commission rules, and they're underwriting only Florida. You have to give the insurance company some flexibility to broaden the pools that they cover, and that's ultimately going to be the only realistic way. The alternative is for entities, for associations to go without insurance coverage or without sufficient insurance coverage, and that's not a solution at all. That's just a problem waiting to happen.
Yep. So. And the recent fires in Pacific Palisades,
we
really
have
tragic.
A number of members who've lost their homes. I mean, not just a fire damage, but it's gone.
Yeah,
and
that's a whole nother subject. And I know you're a busy man. You've got the conference.
I will say, that's not just an insurance problem. But when you have a fire in a home gets damaged or even burned to the ground, that's bad enough, right? It's hard enough to recover from that. When you have entire neighborhoods that are gone, that's unbelievably more complex.
Cataclysmic.
It is, because now you have to get the money out of everybody has to get the money out of the insurance company. So they're pressed to get adjusters in and do the work they need to do. Assuming you get the money in a timely manner, and you want to rebuild, now you need to find an architect to help you do a design. Then you have to get the plans through your local planning commission. Assuming that doesn't take 2 years by itself, then you have to do the construction. And now every contractor, every builder in California, for example, has more work than they know what to do with, right?
Yep.
And so when do you get on their schedule? You have a situation where if this were a single home that burned down, maybe you could say, okay, in a year and a half or 2 years, realistically, we could rebuild this.
Yeah.
That's not realistic when you have
No.
entire neighborhoods gone. It may be
Absolutely.
4 or 5 years.
Actually, on top of that, you have the toxic nature of the debris,
Sure.
which has to be remediated and bagged and sent to landfills, which is time intensive. But you also have to rebuild all the infrastructure.
Right.
You know, the sewer lines,
Right. The power,
the water lines, the fire hydrants were working, the power, the utilities, the cable, all the undergrounds, everything there has to be rebuilt because it was built pell-mell, you know, kind of added on, accreted, and now they're going to have to redo the whole thing. That's going to take a tremendous amount of time.
At a substantially different
cost.
Code requirement than it was originally built.
And cost.
Yeah. And by definition cost, and so it's gonna take, I mean, honestly, it's going to take years. Mm-hmm. I look at the damage from Hurricane Helene early last fall, the same kind of thing. I mean, there are towns in Western North Carolina and Western Virginia that it's going to be years before they're back to whatever normal looks like.
Yeah.
And it's very unfortunate, but I mean, when you have a widespread, disaster like that, it's everything. It's not just that house, but it's all the infrastructure, it's all the utilities, it's everything.
Yeah, that was a 1-2 punch with Helene and then the fires in California. Jeez.
Yeah. And in the case of Helene, I mean, they didn't lose just homes and neighborhoods and towns, but they lost bridges. I mean, if you can't get a tractor trailer full of building supplies in to do the rebuilding because the bridge is out, you got to build the bridge first.
Yep.
And that's not an overnight job either.
Before we wrap up,
I'd
like you to maybe talk to all the new community managers and the new business partners and the new board members that are coming into the association, and maybe just give them a piece of advice that you've learned in the last 23-4 years that you've been doing this, on what they can do, what they can look forward to with the association here.
I think first of all, I mean, this being part of CAI has been an honor of a lifetime. And I wrote a column for the magazine, the last issue, and I think we do great things. I think, the things like our best practices reports and the other things you've referred to, we do really good stuff. We do great education. We do great events. But maybe the most important thing we do and the best thing we do is the connections we build among people, the network that we've created. Because here's the truth is that there are almost no problems and challenges that a board would have, or a manager would have, or a business partner would have that haven't happened before. Someone hasn't already solved. And so if you can tap into that network through CAI, it's going to make your life a lot easier and a lot smoother, because somebody out there has probably dealt with this before, maybe a bunch of somebodies, and you can get 3 or 4 good ideas on how to solve a particular problem, a particular challenge you might be having. That's the secret sauce for CAI, is those connections, those people, the amount of knowledge and expertise that exists in our 50,000 plus members exists nowhere else in the world. And it's critical to take advantage of that.
That's great wisdom. Great wisdom.
Thank you.
And I know I'm speaking for everybody in the association when I say thank you for all you've done for the industry, and best of luck on the next phase of your life.
I appreciate that. It's been a great ride. I've really enjoyed it. It's now time to spend a little more time with family and travel and do some other things that I love. But I'll still be around. I keep threatening my staff that I'm going to come to conference next year in Fort Lauderdale.
Cool.
Just sit at the bar and let people buy me drinks.
Like Link Cummings.
Yeah, exactly.
That'd be awesome.
Because conference week is great, but it is a busy work week for me. I'd love to be able to come to conference as an attendee and just kind of chill.
Well, thank you so much for all you've done. It's been an amazing journey.
And thank you for inviting me to chat with you.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Please stay safe.
Absolutely.